Welcome to the Orchid Hut. Today's video is a creative do-it-yourself project for an outdoor orchid growing space. But it's not the space that I showed you in the introduction. It's this new growing space that is over to the side of the Orchid Hut, and we have a very noisy blue jay in the canopy overhead, so let me show you a little bit what that looks like. There are Mississippi kites flying around, there are some doves, and there's a neighbor running some sort of power equipment, so we may hear some of that as well. But this is the canopy that is over the Orchid Hut, as well as the new growing space that we're going to talk about today. And I wanted to share this with you because it really is such an easy do-it-yourself project if you put a little bit of thought and planning into it at the onset. So I want to give you all those ideas today, and it's not that you would necessarily have to build this same exact copy of what I've done, but sometimes other people's creative ideas for growing spaces can kind of give you a springboard for what you might want to do in an area that you have. So the reason that this idea came to be, and by the way, I'm not on a tripod today, so if you see a little bit of shaking, it is because it's a bit windy and I don't have a tripod. As well, the light is going to kind of come in and out, so hopefully this video won't be too dark. It is a partly cloudy day. And I'm sitting out here in long pants and long sleeves and a hat to protect my head and face and neck because the mosquitoes are still pretty ferocious, but the wind is keeping them down a little bit today, so I thought I'd get this video out of the way. So the reason, again back to that I did this extra growing space is because the shelf along the Orchid Hut, which you saw in the introduction, was getting a bit full, and it was getting a tiny bit crowded, and it just wasn't looking as nice as it could. And I had some much larger orchids that needed some more space. So along my back fence here and under the canopy, I decided to create this additional growing space. Now we're going to kind of start with the planning things that happened here. Originally I wanted to spend around $200 or less if I could get away with it. Some of these supplies we had left over from other yard projects, and it turned out that we started on this little construction thing last fall, but then we were interrupted and weren't able to finish it, so we finished it this spring. So the cost was spread out over a good 4, 5, 6 months. So the $200 budget that I started with sort of became less important as all of that time passed, but I still didn't want the cost to get out of control, and I wanted to reuse as much of what we already had left over from other projects as possible. And then the planning part, well, I knew it was under this canopy, so the light would be fine. This is a southern exposure in my yard, so east is on the right hand side and west is on the left hand side, but south is sort of the midday exposure here, but still very dappled light even when the sun is out because of the canopy overhead. But in my yard there were a few things to kind of consider because these large trees do have some roots that are sort of like at the surface of the dirt, and so we did have to kind of plan around some large oak tree roots that we didn't want to have to cut out. And I'll kind of come over here to the side and show you what that looks like. There are, some large roots coming up, and I didn't want my brick edging to be all sort of lumpy and wobbly because of these tree roots. So we did have to kind of plan around that. Now, as well, we had to plan around our existing sprinkler system in the back. So there are some sprinkler heads that we didn't want to cover up, either with the bricks or the rocks or, you know, certainly the plant stand. And then once this was in place, I did have to adjust one of the sprinkler heads so that it was not getting these plants wet when I didn't want it to. So those are all sort of planning things to think about ahead of time before you lay out the space. And then of course you need to decide on size. This particular one, just so that you can have a bit of a frame of reference, the boards that run in between the cinder blocks are 6 feet long. So the space is, you know, a bit wider than that, probably like about 9 feet if you go to the outside of the edging stones, and it probably comes out about 4.5 feet to the front. So you can actually make this any size that, you know, you want to. Now, this wasn't the first time that I had made one of these. I have a very similar plant stand on my patio, so pulling it together was easy because I had done it once before. Now, the edging stones. We had about half of these left over from another yard project, and then we had to purchase the remaining part. We were lucky enough to find ones that matched. I chose white stone underneath, and the reason is because I wanted it to be, you know, as light as possible. Now, if you want to do this in your space, you know, you're kind of thinking, well, I want to diminish the bright light a bit, then you might want to go with dark or black stones. But I chose this white marble just because I wanted to make sure the light was reflecting back on the plants, because it can be a bit more shady in this location, especially on a cloudy day. Now, the base of the stand are just cinder blocks, and you know, you have to decide the height that you want. At the bottom of both of the green sort of cement parts there is a brick that's just a riser, so you can kind of see there's a little brick on the bottom that's a riser, and then there are 2 full cinder blocks on top of that, and you turn them in such a way so that eventually your 4x4 boards can go through the hole of the cinder blocks. And then when you choose the wood for the actual part that the plant is going to sit on, you need to make sure that that wood is as true as possible, meaning it's not warped, it's not sort of bowed, because that's not going to work out well when you're trying to place something on it. We were at the home improvement store, and we took out a number of different 4x4 pieces until we found to where it looked like we could get lengths that were true and straight. All right, so then it was just spray paint for the cinder blocks, you know, choose whatever color you like. And then we did hand paint with a brush the wood boards that are running through the cinder blocks. Okay, so then these are all my Mexican Talavera pots on here, which I think really just sort of adds to the whole aesthetic of the area, because these pots just are so beautiful. I am trying to get them all on saucers because that does hold a little bit of extra humidity after I water the plant or after it rains. But I don't have saucers for all of them just yet. And then once everything is painted and dried, you know, you just sort of put the boards in and, you know, get everything level. That was a little bit of a challenge at the bottom, getting the stones in such a way so that the entire thing is level when you put it together. That is another consideration. We did have to work at that a bit to make sure that the amount of stones underneath each of those cinder blocks was something that would make the entire thing level when it was done. Okay, now I'm gonna walk up a little bit closer here to show you what I put at the back. And this caused a little bit of, I guess you could say, decision making that was kind of tough, because I was looking for a grid like this. And I thought I could find something relatively inexpensive. But it turns out that's not the case, because I knew that if I actually purchased like a piece that was meant to be a trellis, which this is, and that's what I ended up with, but I knew that that was going to be a little bit more expensive than if I could find something else in the hardware store just to use as a trellis. But that idea was not working. You know, you can find some grid wire, but it's not really sturdy enough then to hold anything that you might want to hang on it. So you do need to think about being able to support the weight of what you want to put on the trellis. And then I did find some wooden trellises, but they were kind of already soft and wobbly, and I thought, well, that's not going to hold up very long, so I didn't go with a wood trellis. I did eventually find this gridded trellis, and it is meant for this purpose, so it can hold the weight. And I wanted something that had enough squares on it to give me a lot of different options for hanging pots and other mounted orchids. And for example, I'll sort of zoom in here behind this Maxillaria tenafolia, and you can see that the pot is hanging by just some S hooks at the back, and there's like a piece of picture wire that goes behind the pot as well, and this works really well. I mean, it's sturdy. And then this particular piece, this wooden driftwood, just has 2 cup hooks in the back, and this will be an upcoming video where I'm gonna show you mounting some orchids on this gorgeous piece of driftwood, and it just really just has cup hooks at the back to hang onto the grid. And the grid is actually sort of stabilized at the bottom, but then it's just resting on 3, I don't know what you call these kinds of hooks, but they're screwed into the board of the fence, and then it's just a place where the grid can rest in a little sort of valley area there, and there's 3 of them. And that's another place where you want to really be careful with your leveling to make sure that the finished trellis is going to look like it's level and even. Okay, so you know, I had this $200 budget, and now that I've shown you this grid, let me back up here, pardon the wobbling of the camera, but this was where it kind of went a bit south on my budget, because the trellis alone was $179.99. But this was after months and months of looking for something that could work for this purpose and not exactly finding it, and then just, I guess, resigning myself to the fact that I was going to have to buy the more expensive real trellis for this purpose. Okay, so I'm so pleased with how this turned out. Let me do just a really little quicker view here of all of the orchids that are making their home here now. You can see a little bit more light coming through the clouds right now, so you can see how the dappled sunlight looks a little bit better. And then at some point what I'm going to do is I have these low plant hooks, and I'm gonna put them right over here to the side somewhere and do some hanging orchids on the end of this this side of the plant stand. Okay, so that is my creative do-it-yourself project. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. The subscribe button will be coming up in the right-hand corner of the screen. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to click that notifications bell for when I post something new, and talk to you all next time.